everyone, today's guest is Dani Dufresne, the Emmy Award-winning executive producer and founder of the Aux Co. Dani has spent over 2 decades producing high-stakes campaigns across broadcast, digital, and experiential with brands like Nike and Hulu. After years inside big holding company agencies, she launched the Aux Co. in 2017 to champion a new agency model, helping small and mid-sized shops being able to grow smaller, collaborate better, and deliver bold creative without the overhead and burnout of the old, huge conglomerate agency system. Today, she's here to talk about how agencies can rethink competition, embrace fractional expertise, and why building a community and real-world brand experiences may be the next big shift that we have in the agency space. Welcome to the show, Dani.
Hi, great to be here.
I think that there's quite a lot that's going on in the industry for several reasons, but I want to start with this traditional model. I mean, I've talked about it several times, but I want to talk about this like full service model and where we think it's like kind of stemming from and why it's still really a thing that so many smaller agencies are trying to emulate from like the WPP Dentsu agencies of the world.
I feel like as the larger agencies have sort of come together with trying to figure out how they can stay relevant, how they can stay profitable, we've seen all of these over the last decade, smaller agencies pop up because it's people that really care about creative and people that want to make sure that the creative still like is at the forefront of projects, where when it feels like a lot of the larger agencies have been really, that's kind of the first thing they've been tossing out, right? Is that the creative teams, the production teams, they want to focus on digital as far as the media is concerned and media buying and data instead of like how it is that people are actually interacting with a brand's content and with a brand directly. And so with that, and with these agencies not having to hold on to any of that 40 to 50% overhead. Now, like they can start up, it can just be 2 guys that came from an Ogilvy or a Gray and they have big ideas, but maybe they don't know what to do next. They don't know how to make those ideas. They can come up with the big risky campaigns that brands want, and it's not going to cost that brand what it would if they had been, stayed at a WPP, et cetera.
Have you read the book Madison Avenue Manslaughter?
Mm-mm.
So
Sounds fascinating already.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but it like went through a history from like the 1960s, 1950s to now, so like Mad Men era to now, and like how the agency has transformed over time. And this idea really that I just find so interesting about the modern agency world that we live in today. It's like when you think about the Mad Men era, the reality is that there was like 2 types of media, right? There was radio and there was print. Like those were the 2 types of media, and that creative wasn't even charged for. It was entirely based on how much media was run from the campaign, and that's how agencies made money back in like the heyday. But now there's thousands of different types of media, so many different types of channels, so many different ways of going about it. The idea of being able to be an expert in all of those different things, it's like before you had to be an expert in 2, and now we have to be an expert in 1,000. And so it's incredibly difficult and a true overhead burden. So unless you're doing billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, it's very difficult to support that amount of overhead.
Yeah, and at the same time, it feels like as more brands have been like, so confused. I just need help figuring out where to put my money. There's too many options. It seems like the agencies have stepped in. Well, let me help you figure out where to put that money. And it just so happens to be that my recommendation is where that money is going to go, mostly in my own pocket. Like it's not, and we're now kind of seeing the downfall of that with just how low engagement has been. And I think the report on Friday came out that something like $24 billion of wasted programmatic media in Q2 alone was used.
Wow.
And that's just because putting it out there is not impacting sales. People are sick of it. It's just because you can slap an ad on something does not mean it's a good place for that ad to be. And it's kind of like when we had too much real estate. It's the same sort of thing. Now that bubble is bursting a little bit. And I think people are focusing more on creative. And that's why we're also seeing a big shift to nostalgia and things that really make you feel something, right? Like with the rise of AI, we need to know that the stuff that we're looking at is real. And the only way to know that is that it needs to actually make you feel something, whether it's tapping into a piece of nostalgia or into like, it's almost like going back to beta because AI can't copy that.
I mean, I creative absolutely is going to become more and more important, and I like the fact that you're calling out agencies for having been so focused on how can I get as much of the revenue as possible versus being a true thought partner, strategist with the client to allow for them to have the business objectives, because it is truly a problem. The other piece that I see really interesting is specifically talking to the small and mid-sized agencies is that there's this dynamic because of this traditional model where they're needing to feel like they're competing, and they are now competing. When you think about like the agencies of huge sort of size agencies of the world, the fact that they've gone down market, and anytime there is economic turmoil, they go down market. They're ended up competing with the boutique agencies in mid-market. So you end up having this dynamic where boutique agencies feel like they have to kind of fake it till they make it. So they end up faking their expertise. Why does this fail? And how can the small to mid-size agencies pitch the bigger ideas without having to overpromise and be something that they're not?
I mean, I think even just the beginning of when you were discussing how agencies they're trying to decide where the money goes, right? And I think this idea that you have more knowledge than the bigger agencies or even the same amount, like they still don't know what they're doing either. Most of the time, they are outsourcing to a in-network agency or another team that they are just they're doing the exact stuff that you as a smaller agency have to do. And I think that everyone across the board always respects, you know what? I'm not sure, but I have a guy for that. Like, I'm not sure about that, but I have the right person. Everyone respects that as an answer more than like, yes. I also think that the capabilities that a small agency has sort of as a more as a thought leader or a professional like consultant in that way. They can take the role of saying, I know you're asking me for blank, but in reality, what I think you should do is this, right? And saying, not even just saying no, but saying maybe that's not a good idea, right? Like the problem that so many of these larger agencies have is they've built in no quality control. There's no one willing to be like, oh, maybe that's not the best way, or oh, you know what, they just take their order and pass it down. And I think that is where these smaller agencies can come in and say, you know what, yes, we may be a rebranding agency or a blank graphic agency, whatever it is, but we also have teams and partners that can help bring this to life for you in other ways. I don't think it's a matter of like faking it till you make it. I think it's a matter of like having the tools in your toolkit to be able to access, but also knowing like what your strengths are and what you want to focus on.
So the not having the access to the people that are the experts, that's an interesting thing about it. I wonder if it's been like this self-fulfilling prophecy, really, because like the agency industry really like has this huge component of like fox in the henhouse oriented idea where they don't actually collaborate with each other. They don't work as closely as they possibly can be. Working with communities of agency owners, one of the things that happens, like one of the most common questions I get asked is, well, what if there's an agency in the group or one of your clients that is a competitor to me? And I mean, in my career now, there's only been, I can think of one instance where two clients were bidding on the same piece of work. And there's so much business out there that it's incredibly unlikely. And that one, I just don't see the world that way anyways. I think that there's enough business out there and I don't see it that way. So I don't categorically don't agree with the mentality. But the reality is that the more that we have the right people in our corner, the more that we have those thought partners that are able to make us better. Because like I can't possibly be an expert in everything. Like I read a ton and I cannot spend enough time reading in order for me to actually be that. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in everything either. So I just curious on your thoughts on that.
No, I fully agree with you as far as one of the reasons I got out of the big agency life was because this idea that we're all competing for these tiny little pieces of the pie is just ridiculous to me. I mean, I think it's even within yourself, right? I think I've been there when these agencies are merging together, and the number one issue they always have is that they don't share P&Ls. So it doesn't matter. They don't want to work. They're not incentivized to work together. They are incentivized to give an entire thing to another one, but they're not like to another with in-network agency, but they're not like even at larger agencies, the offices aren't on the same P&L. So like I remember being at a New York office being like, oh, I know that the LA office has this perfect skill or this person, and you are not incentivized to do that. In fact, you're incentivized to do the opposite because you only can care about your own department at your office and your P&L. And that's not, I think instead of being, I try to tell a lot of production companies and creative studios to stop trying to sell themselves as an agency, because want to be an agency, that's a different entity. And at the same time, I tell agencies to stop selling themselves as creative studios or production companies, because they're not. And everyone has the thing that they're good at, but stop trying to compete for stop thinking that the pie is so little that you have to offer yourself as being the end all be all everything, right? And instead find that talent, those agencies, those creatives that you really admire or want to work with, and have them in your corner. Like, see them as additions to your team, not as competitors to your team.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on that. I mean, the thing that I see happen frequently, it's like the reality of what ends up taking place. So let's even talk about, it's not new business, right? It's existing business. So we're working with the client, we have a great relationship, they trust us, we've done excellent work so far, and then they end up having another challenge, because the reality in business is that each stage of growth results in more challenges, more obstacles, more things that need to happen. And so the client ends up coming to you asking, hey, can you do this for us as well? And then the smaller agencies end up saying yes, and then they try to figure it out, and then they end up doing it lackluster because they're not experienced in it. And then the client ends up having the exact opposite experience, and they end up leaving with a sour taste in their mouth, not really happy. I think that if you have it built into the base kind of business model, it can have great impact to your P&L. You can have the people that do the work that they excel at in the appropriate fashion and in the right area that they should be focused in, and not needing to be everything. I mean, I think this is an app analogy, and the one that I tend to use, and considering I just picked up my car from the shop yesterday, if I were to take my car in to the shop and my computer broke today, and I'm taking my car in to get my brakes done, and then I walk into the auto mechanic with my laptop and say, hey, can you fix this as well? Is it going to make me happy that they can fix my laptop? Or is it going to make me question whether they can fix my brakes now? And it's going to do the latter, right? Like, I'm not going to trust them with either now, because they can't possibly be an expert in both. Like, they're very different things. And the reality that we are trying to be both and trying to do everything is just, it just feels so backwards in my head at the very least.
I feel like, that's a big way that I ended up starting my business. Was people started coming to me. For anyone that had ever worked with me was like, hey, do you have a guy for this? Or, hey, I need to do this. Do you know anyone? Like, really for my Rolodex? And I have absolutely no problem being like, this is not my skill sets, but my team can help walk you through it. While we're working with XYZ partner or this person. And I try to be very transparent. I also try to understand that sometimes, on the flip side of that, I'll have a friend or a client say, hey, I really need some out of home media. I want to buy some, you talked about billboards. I want to talk to somebody about that. I'm like, okay, but I don't want to just give you that contact because I know that you don't know enough to have that communication with them. So let me just help you figure out what it is you want. Then I can kind of hand that off. It's not like a needing to control everything or needing the money from everything. It's more about so many types of vendors and agencies and partners communicate differently. And it's making sure that the creative goal or the brand goal is really in line first before I connect anyone. And then I have no problem stepping off, because if it's not something in my skill set, it's not really fueling me.
The Rolodex piece is really interesting because it's really truly worth its weight in gold. The people that you have in your network, the people that you have around you, the people that you surround yourself with, because it is tide raises all boats, if you will. The thing that I find really interesting is the reality of, if we were to go back to 2020, the COVID piece or the social distancing idea, is that if I were to have more conversations and be more collaborative with more agencies, their Rolodexes then could potentially be an extension of mine. Mm-hmm. And the more that I continue to build my network of people, the more useful I can be to clients, the more useful I can be to myself, the more utility I have, the more trust that I can build, all of those things. And it actually makes, it compounds, it has an infinite amount of increase in growth, right? Yeah. The thing that I find interesting that I think would be a useful thing for us to explore for a moment is, let's say that I am a small agency, that a client comes to me where I can do 20 or 30% of the scope of work, this RFP potentially that fell on my desk. And I don't have the expertise to do other pieces of it. So it is going to take collaboration. It is going to take me working with other people in order for me to be able to compete against what may be the Ogilvy's, the McCanns of the world that are also involved in this RFP. And I want to be able to punch a little bit above my weight. So how can I, as a boutique agency, take on these bigger projects, have this conversation, be collaborative with another partner, and actually present it? Do I show it as white label? Do I do I do it as a white label? Do I show that I'm a partner? Like what is your recommendation and thoughts on
I
that?
would say it depends on your goal. So we work a lot with agencies as white label because they are building towards having more of these services within their tool belt. They're building towards that as a future. They want to be able to say this is a project that they did. If it's something that they don't really want to, that's not a goal, but they want to be able to at least execute it for this particular client, I don't think there's a need to do it white label. I think you would just come in and say this is a network partnership that we're doing with XYZ team. And then it also kind of depends on how the client can pay for it, right? Like if I have some clients that just can't manage that many vendors, so it's easier for them to pay me so I can pay these other people. But I don't necessarily try to hide the fact that they are other companies or they are different people. And I think that having that as this is my network, this is the kinds of things that we can bring to you. I think that's really important. I think that too often agency teams, video production teams, like all of these sort of partners spend so much time focusing on what someone can pay them for that they're not having those conversations with people that don't want anything from them or that want to partner with them or that want something from them. Like I do just as much work and calls speaking with potential future partners that maybe I don't have anything to work with now, or hey, I just really love their work on this thing and I want to get to know them. I would say I have a 50-50 split between that and sales calls, and it's extremely important. Even if you don't have anything for them now, having that sense of I just want to take and not give, because I think that's giving is what attracts more people to your business and fills your Rolodex.
That last piece that you just said, I just want to double tap on for a second. Yeah, the transactional nature by way so many people think about things is, I think, rather unfortunate. I mean, I'll take a call with anyone, really.
Yeah.
Tell me why. Let's have a conversation. I'm absolutely happy to meet anyone. And the reality is that happy to help in any way that I can if I can introduce you to the right person. I understand that it also is a point of privilege to say that I'm not particularly worried about needing to try to scoop up as much of the revenue as I possibly can, right? Like I'm not in a place it's necessary. Well, some people are, but I think that the reality is that if you're not looking to build the people around you and in your community, especially just as a base species, like we're a herd animal, really is who we are, right? And I mean, I just think that community, there's so much power in community. In the pre-record, we talked about this idea of being able to bring in production earlier in the creative process, in creative development, and how many projects that you've worked on, both in bigger agency land as well as working with clients the way that you do now, that there's lots of projects that can kind of go off the rails if they were not brought in and production was kind of an afterthought. I'd like to explore that a little bit and how that actually works and why that's useful.
After being on the production company side for about 10 years and then the in-house agency side for about 10 years, that's really just saw a disconnect between the way those two entities communicate and also how much in-house agencies have changed, and the teams they want to keep as much in-house as possible, or they don't have the proper production expertise even involved in the creative pitching. And so it feels more of by the time they've even sold something in, they're sort of just order taking and giving here's exactly what we want to production companies that may or may not even fit the skill set for what the creative is. When I feel like when I've seen the opportunity to have production and media and PR and all of these other teams brought in earlier in the creative development process, that's when you see success. That's when you're able to see campaigns that hit on every note and in every single medium that they're on. And I feel that in my current company, the way that we're set up is that we embed in-house with agencies so that they can really tap us as a white label resource much, much earlier on. And then if they're not retainer, they're just project to project, we don't charge for that time. We will consult during all the prep and pre-pro, and then we'll come on and produce later. It just really gives us the chance to shake the tree, as it were, and see what sticks to the idea. Because at that point, the creative team may have a great idea, but it may be that the way they're thinking it should be executed or what they're envisioning it as isn't the best version of it. So I like to shake it, see what sticks, and then build from there. Oh, do you know that what you could do with this budget if we actually made this, and this? Or have you thought about it like that? I feel that in-house producers do not have that relationship with the creative teams because they're often shunned as just do what I say. Whereas I'm very clear that I have no problem coming in and telling you what I think of the idea. You can be asking a ton of questions and it does not mean that I think the idea is bad. A lot of times I think the idea is great. I'm trying to make sure you know what the idea really is. And I think that there's that era is kind of gone. And we don't have that time anymore for even the directors to come in and do that by the time that like production really needs to get going. And when you see agencies led by creatives, it's more natural that creative thinking is happening at the beginning of a pitch. But now you're seeing where, yeah, those people may be creatives, but they're not even really getting involved in the details of how something's coming to life until later on. There's too much happening. Or maybe they have a big idea, but they don't have any experience in events or digital out of home or other pieces that they maybe aren't considering as a mode for execution within that idea.
One of the things that you mentioned that I just think is really profound in the way that your model works that I just think is really interesting. And the fact that you will engage with people, consult with them, be earlier on in the process to shake the tree as you described it. And I've shared something several times that is in very close alignment to this idea is that we have this idea that a lot of agencies do at the very least that if a client pays me more, then I will talk to them more. Where it's like, well, hold on. If you talk to them more and have a better understanding of their business, perhaps they'll pay you more, right? It's like you're doing it in exactly the opposite direction and you're engaging with your clients in a different fashion that allows for you to have more utility, more value, more impact to them in their entire creative process. And whether that's one and two projects end up becoming revenue and something you end up working on with them, I don't know about that metric piece of it, but the reality is the more activity, the more engagement, the more conversation that you have across every type of person, whether that's a partner, whether that's a client, whether that's your team, whether that's production, whether that's the creative team, like it's so useful. And I'm not saying that every single meeting needs to happen. I also think you should be protective of your time. But yeah, I just really enjoyed that mentality at the very least.
Yeah, I think questioning, especially people that aren't used to being questioned, and I don't know when questions became a bad thing. I think questions are a form of collaboration and a need. You cannot really be collaborating if you're not asking questions, but questioning all of these things and always kind of digging in deep, and sometimes it's a little deeper than first-time creatives would like, is because I want to get to the heart of it. I also want to be able to build that relationship that, now so many of my long-term clients are like, you know what I want. I never have to worry about it. You always know exactly what I want because I've just worked with them for so long and I've not been afraid to ask questions to get to the root of what I know they care about or what their bar is and what they don't, what they absolutely will not compromise on. And I think that's really important. And it's not a bad thing that like in-house people won't do that. It's just that it's not the nature of especially our industry anymore to be questioning what something is about. Like, why do you want it that way? And I think that's what I love doing. A lot of times that's where we find the best ideas and the best parts of a concept come to life. So like I love kicking off with a new client. I especially love kicking off with clients that like really are not used to, they're just used to hiring people that take down their order and give them that exact thing. And even like conflict there is good. I think that like when we don't agree, it ends up actually making the work better because we both learn something new. And I kind of embrace that instead of, walking away from conflict.
Yeah, I remember when you were saying this, I was thinking back to a conversation that my husband and I were having. He's a creative as well. And, I went to college for fine art. That one of my favorite things in school was crit. Like I really enjoyed people giving me their thoughts, asking questions, doing all of that. And his face really bristled when I mentioned that and that he actually really didn't like it. And at least my takeaway from that was, and seeing this happen across a lot of creatives, is that it's so often that a truly bona fide creative person, they end up pouring a piece of themselves into it. And so when you have that conflict, the question, they end up feeling like their own person is being questioned. And I don't know, I guess I just see the world very differently in that when it comes to if you're creating art for yourself, that's one thing. But the reality of the creative work that we do in this industry, at the very least, we are creating work as a brush for the client. And so it's a little bit different. And if we can take our ego out of it for a moment, I mean, I love being proved wrong, which is
Yeah.
just, maybe I'm just a sadist, but I like being proved wrong because that means that I learned something new and I'm developing as a person. Otherwise, I'm stagnating, and that's boring.
Exactly. I think that it's, if I'm asking questions, if I'm trying to like, so often we see huge campaigns like the Sydney Sweeney Jean campaign and stuff like that, that is made that probably started a good idea. But when you make a campaign that has, it's kind of soulless, right? It's kind of trying to be just a blank or empty, like if it's an empty vessel, then people fill their own stuff in it, right? And I think that too often you're at the end of something like that and you're doing a postmortem and you're like, why didn't this work? Or why? And it's always because like there's at least 3 people that had ideas that did not like chime in when they should have. And I think that I understand. I like to say we have no ego, because as producers, we're so used to making other people's ideas that our egos were checked a long, long time ago. Like we have no skin in the game. We just want to make everybody happy and make sure that, at least in my frame of mind, is I want to make sure the creatives are as happy as possible. And a lot of times I think we forget, especially as I'm working with younger creatives, they were not as trained in how to bring an idea from their brain to a piece of paper to the pitch deck to life, right? To actually shooting it or executing it. And so there's lots of stuff that it's not what the idea is or even how it looks in the end. It's the how behind every piece of it, the how it gets made has a huge impact. And they're not used to like having to kind of think about those things. And I never want to say, this is how you're going to do it. I try to like, I'm leading the witness a little bit. I'm questioning them so that they think about those things, so that they actually can make a more robust idea from day 1 instead of day 5.
You mentioned there's actually empirical fact around the idea that there's so many instances where people just don't actually speak up. So I forget the name of the study, and I'll make sure to include it in the show notes. There was a study done at Google over a period of about a decade where they spent tens of millions of dollars to learn between one team versus another. What was the discernible difference between the 2 different teams and why one was more creative, more impactful, was able to move the needle further, is that they were actually more collaborative and each person spoke in their room. So it was a group that didn't have that natural born leader that was pushing the meeting forward, and that it allowed for more creative collaboration, and that the best idea ultimately comes from that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have ended up with, campaigns like the Chevy Nova trying to launch into Mexico, that when you end up saying Nova in Spanish is Nova, which is doesn't go. So you spent billions of dollars trying to run a campaign in another language, which someone I'm sure in the room that spoke the language didn't say, hey, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Especially a lot of younger people. I mean, I remember being in those rooms where I was like, well, I must not know. Like, I'm not going to say anything because surely there's someone smarter than me. Like, it's actually more difficult when they're so close to the idea that they don't. You're more blind the closer you are to it. And I think there's a difference between like creative critique and questioning to get it like for improvement and collaboration. And then I think when it's like, well, of course the client's going to have someone's going to have a note because it's just, they're trying to like check a box that it's their job. They asked a question, and that still happens. But I think you can always tell the difference when you're working with someone and they're not trying to get to know, they're trying to get it to yes. And I think that's when you can tell the difference.
The curiosity piece is vital. Dani, I very much can tell as when we went into the pre-recording and I was sharing with you that I really enjoyed the conversation then. I really enjoyed the conversation today. I feel like we're going to have loads of really fun conversations, both with the mic on and with the mic off. As listeners want to get in touch with you, how can they find you?
They can find us at Aux.co. That's AUX.co. Or you can check me out, Dani Dufresne, on LinkedIn. And feel free. I love chatting with people. So you can set up a call at the top of my profile anytime, even whether it's just to consult on what you have going on or talk about the latest creative campaigns that are falling very flat lately.
We'll make sure to include all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening in today. With all of the shifts in the industry, it is easy to feel overwhelmed or unsure of your next move. So I'm not here to try to sell you anything. I just want to give back and guide you through the uncertainty. Whether you're navigating new trends or just need some clarity, we're here to listen and offer advice. Head to creativeagencysuccess.com/chat to book a free 15-minute chat with an agency mentor who can provide you with a fresh perspective. Let's figure out the best steps for your agency's growth together.